Recently, I was browsing through YouTube and got recommended this video. Watching it, I thought, hey, this got a lot of views, I should do something like it for RPG Maker. Why do I do this to myself? So, yeah, I've got a lot of RPG Maker games to play, but what's great though is that a lot of these games are pretty wacky and interesting on their own, and after playing just one, I have a lot I want to say. I'm probably gonna make a commentary series out of playing these, but for today, let's just talk about the first I played from this list, and what I'd consider to be the most based RPG Maker game I've played yet. Space Funeral is the culmination of everything I think an RPG Maker game should be, a game imbued with the individuality of its creator, ultimately used to comment on something they feel needs to be discussed. A game which is at first glance an audio-visual experience, yet which sneakily sucks you in with its ingenious writing and coverage of lesser discussed themes. It's a game you can look at and confidently say, I have never seen anything like this before. Wait a minute. Oh no. Turns out there is actually something I've seen before in Space Funeral. Shitty turn-based combat. Now, I'm not averse to turn-based combat as a whole. Some of my favorite games actually have turn-based combat that I rather enjoy. However, I can't help but feel that Space Funeral would have been dramatically improved if it weren't included. I do respect Space Funeral for having somewhat unique skills and abilities, but none of them are fundamentally new, and they mostly function as gimmicks. Combat is ultimately a waste of time. It isn't particularly fun to engage with, and it doesn't enhance the game's message as well as having no combat at all would have. This is something I'll address in a later video, but some RPG Maker games feel compelled to include gameplay, be it puzzles or combat, even when it only hinders the story and overall experience. Anyways, the best way to explain why I dislike the inclusion of combat is to explain this video's title. What theme does Space Funeral address to make it so based? Well, first, since a few of my viewers are nearing their deathbed and don't know what based means, let's quickly define it. Let's start with an example. Say that I tweeted that there's no inherent problem with the over-sexualization of females in anime. This is a rather volatile topic and would get a pretty intense response, thus it is the perfect time where if you agree with me, you would simply say, that's based. It could also be used ironically to joke about my opinion no matter your stance on it. To me, based simply means that you're acknowledging a take as being volatile or contradicting of what many normally say. In the case of Space Funeral, that opinion would be that standard JRPGs are fucking lame. On the Space Funeral Wikipedia page, this is said in a much classier way. Essentially, the developer believed that RPG Maker games are more interesting when they break from tradition. In Space Funeral, this point is illustrated rather ingeniously. I mean, for Christ's sake, the entire game looks like a fucking acid trip. You play as a perpetually sad, autistic potato man accompanied by an eldritch abomination as you adventure through the land of oh my god and what the fuck. You do a bunch of obtuse bullshit and observe New York crackheads going about their daily lives. However, underneath all of this insanity, bits of compelling moments and dialogue manage to surface just often enough that you want to see it to the end. You can sniff a twist coming, just like that feeling right before you're about to throw up. You know something is coming, you just don't know if that something is gonna be chunky or smooth. So you stay, pushing through the combat to experience more demented visuals and to find the City of Forms, the place you must go to save the world. Upon reaching the City of Forms, you find errors and glitches. They've been popping up during your journey, yet now they are everywhere, you having reached their source. Forging deeper into the deformed city, you find Moon, the man responsible for the Great Change, which made things as you've seen them during your travels. You see, the world wasn't always a bad acid trip, and Moon reveals this through his monologue. Moon was an artist, one who sought perfection in all things, thus he moved to this city, a place of pure form. However, he found himself discouraged, as anything created in the pursuit of form was nothing but a pathetic mockery of the city around him. Thus, he destroyed the perfect city. We have to destroy that we can build again. Upon defeating Moon, we return to our perfect world. Space Funeral is a critique of the copycat nature of many RPG developers. It shouts boldly at Twitter and says not every RPG has to be Final Fantasy, a notion I heavily agree with. I believe that RPG Maker games are at their best when infused with the individuality of their creator. The RPG Maker engine does not stand out from other engines, save 4. Its accessibility. Everything you can do with RM could be done better in another engine, thus the only reason to use it is because it's an easy vessel to share your unique ideas. None of the systems you can make with RPG Maker will ever stand out or ever be a selling point. The only thing that will be is your ideas. What I'm trying to say here is that you can't just make a standard first-person shooter, for example, and expect that to stand out being made in RPG Maker. You can totally innovate on the idea and do something crazy like The World as Your Weapon does, and that would definitely be a selling point. But if you're just making like a standard system, a standard first-person shooter, a standard platformer, then that being made in RPG Maker will never stand out or surpass a first-person shooter or a platformer made in another engine. The RPG Maker engine will never be on the same level as other engines when it comes to gameplay, but you can definitely still innovate mechanics like The World Your Weapon does, and make your game stand out from other games. RPG Maker is built to easily allow you to share those ideas, and a unique perspective and experience is what the average person wants from RPG Maker anyways, not unique gameplay. This is why I say that Space Funeral is the most based RPG Maker game. So often I see people forcing otherwise standard systems to work with RM, congratulating themselves and others when they do so, completely forgetting that the inclusion of these systems means absolutely nothing. You could argue that unique ideas matter in every engine, and you're not totally wrong, but unique ideas are all that RPG Maker has. Other engines can hone their gameplay to perfection, yet no matter how hard you force RPG Maker, you'll never polish the gameplay as well as another engine could. RPG Maker is just too limited in that department due to making it so easy to use. However, the one thing that can never ever be limited is the human imagination. No matter how limited the development of mechanics in RPG Maker may be, your writing can never be limited. This is the actual reason why so many RPG Maker games fail. They require the individuality of their creator, displayed both visually and through the writing, yet so many RPG Maker developers are simply not writers. If you want to make a game, period, the one skill you need to hone is your writing. Your ideas set the limit for how far you can go, and then later on, the execution determines how far into those ideas you actually go. So yeah, Space Funeral is the most based RPG Maker game because it shows people how far they could go if they'd stop copying and start dreaming.